Hey guys, it's Kevin with my review for Space Jam: A New Legacy. And this once again does center on an NBA player, but this time, of course, it is LeBron James. He is basically, living his life, but he's having a hard time connecting with his son. He really wants his son to go off to basketball camp, but you can see that his son is not really into that. He's much more into building a video game and, becoming this, video game designer and things like that, which LeBron is just having a very hard time overall connecting with. But basically, one day he is brought into this pitch meeting where he is given this opportunity to work with Warner Brothers. He ends up declining the offer, and the next thing he knows, both him and his son are basically abducted by a algorithm that is a part of Warner Brothers known as Algae Rhythm. Algae Rhythm ends up kidnapping LeBron's son and basically tells him that in order to get his son back, he has to beat him in a game of basketball with no one to really fill his team except for the Looney Tunes. So it's up to LeBron and the Looney Tunes to hopefully save the day and make sure that, basically get LeBron to rescue his son. So Space Jam: A New Legacy, I was actually very excited for this movie. Now, I will say right now, you guys can say whatever you want. Don't hate me. I am not a big fan of the original Space Jam. I know it's very upsetting. I know there's a lot of people that have a lot of nostalgia for that movie, but I think that's the thing, is that as a kid, I just didn't watch it all that much. There's other movies I watched a lot more. In fact, Looney Tunes Back in Action, that was much more of the nostalgic Looney Tunes live action animated hybrid film for me. That was the one that I watched a lot more as a kid. Space Jam, I never dislike, but I just never really got into it. But over the years, I really have not liked it all that much, and I did rewatch it before this movie, and it just doesn't really hold up for me at all. I don't really think there is a lot to it as a film. It feels much more just like a commercial for Michael Jordan and hyping up how amazing he is. And sure, he's an amazing player, but they're just, he's one of the best of all time, obviously. But there just isn't a lot to it as a film, and I thought with Space Jam: A New Legacy, there was an opportunity to actually do something different with this, to actually give this a little bit more of a story, a little bit more substance, and it just looked a lot more creative than what we had seen in that first movie. This film has been getting some really negative reviews, a lot of people not liking it, a lot of people saying it's one of the worst things ever, but I gotta say, I saw it, and I actually really like this movie a lot. Space Jam: A New Legacy is, I think, an immense improvement over the first film. This film has way more going on. It's way more entertaining. There's a lot more of a story to it. There's just a lot more to like about this one as a sequel. So yeah, I actually surprisingly like this one a lot more than that first movie. I know it's going to be blasphemous for some people, but that's exactly where I am with it. But we are just getting to right now, starting off with the cast. And that's the thing. Going into this movie, I figured that the acting would be a lot better. One of my biggest criticisms with the original film is I just don't think Michael Jordan as an actor really had a lot of range in him. It didn't really feel like he overall wanted to be there. He looked just kind of annoyed and kind of just like he was reading off the script most of the time. But LeBron James, we already know can act because he's been in quite a few films before. He's done a really good job. And yeah, here I think he does what he needs to do. He has a lot more charisma in this role. He is just has far more range. I mean, he seems like he is having a lot of fun. And what I also like about James is that he doesn't just act like he's the greatest thing ever constantly. There are moments in this movie where he can be a bit of a dick. He can be, someone that feels a bit unlikable, but James really does embrace that, and I think it really does work when it comes to his character. He was way more charismatic here. I thought that he, really gave a strong performance in this film, and I really like what he ended up doing. I think he carried it quite nicely. I think that in general, he just had a lot more to do, and I think overall, he did a really good job with this film. He's not at all trying to replicate what Michael Jordan's doing. It's a very different kind of role, but I think it overall really did work, and I liked what he ended up doing here. But make no mistake, this movie would be absolutely nothing without the truly, insane performance that Don Cheadle does give in this movie as Algae Rhythm, who, look, going into this movie, I was very excited to see what he was going to do, but holy shit, I was not prepared for just how ridiculous of a performance this really is. Cheadle knows exactly what kind of movie that he's in. He doesn't even try to take this character that seriously, and I really liked what he ended up doing. You could see that he was just having so much fun here, and every single scene with him is just so satisfying and fun to watch, and you really feel like he is giving it his all here. I really loved what he ended up doing in this movie. He wasn't afraid to get really wacky and just really be as over the top as possible. He is hamming it up throughout this entire thing. It is such a goofy performance, but oh my god, it works so well. Something about his comedic timing in this movie, something about his line delivery, it just all works so well in this movie. I was soaking up every single second of what he was doing, and I think in general, he is just so entertaining throughout this. I loved what he ended up doing in this movie, and he's far and away the best performance in this film. I loved what he ended up doing here. As far as the rest cast goes, everyone really does do a strong job. Obviously, the Looney Tunes themselves, are a lot of fun to watch. They're always really good, and that's definitely the case here. I think all of the voice actors for the Looney Tunes all still do a really strong job in this movie. Jeff Bergman, Eric Bauza, Zendaya even, I thought, wasn't too bad. I know there's some controversy because apparently she ended up playing this role at like the last second. They were originally going to have like Keith Susi come back, but then something happened and Zendaya ended up stepping in, but I thought she did a good job. I wasn't, I didn't feel that it was too jarring or anything like that. I was overall impressed by what she did. Cedric Joe, who plays LeBron's son, I actually thought was really good. He gives a really strong child performance here. You understand the passion that Dom really does have for video games, but he also does a good job at playing a kid that isn't always on the right side of things. There are points in this movie where you are against Dom, and you can also see his point of view, and I thought overall he definitely did do a strong job in this movie. I liked what he ended up doing here. Sonequa Martin Green was really good. Khris Davis, really this entire cast, everyone does a really good job. I felt like everyone was having a lot of fun, and I really did enjoy the acting throughout this movie. But now I really do want to get into the directing and the writing for this movie, which this is where we get to the stuff that I think really works a lot better here. The directing from Malcolm D. Lee, it's another thing where he kind of stepped in at the last second. Originally, it was the same director as Space Jam, and he apparently was having some difficulties, some creative differences with Malcolm D. Lee, and it honestly was for the best, because Terence Nance as a director, I just never really felt had all that much of a style when it came to the first Space Jam. I just never really felt that his heart was fully in it, and I felt like that was what was always one of my biggest issues with the film, whereas Malcolm D. Lee's directing, I think, is infinitely better here, because he knows exactly what kind of movie he is directing. This film is really wacky. This film is really dumb at points, but it also is very creative, and I think he does a good job with that, and you can see his passion throughout this film. He really is trying to do something different, and that's something I really did appreciate, is that though this movie is called Space Jam, it's a very different movie than the first one, and I appreciate that a lot. I think there's this tendency where we tend to get comedy sequels, and they're almost exactly the same as the first one, and this is nothing like the first one, and that alone is something that I was very happy about. I was happy that this film was aiming to be something different, which obviously I knew that from the trailer, but that's something I really did appreciate with his directing. But the other thing I really enjoyed is that there's actually a lot of heart to this movie, which is something I think very few people are talking about, and I just don't understand why, because I think the first film, to me at least, it feels kind of soulless. There just isn't a lot going on, and I think with this movie, there's just a lot more heart that feels genuine. There's a lot more of substance to this film, and I think Malcolm D. Lee overall just did a really good job directing here. Let's get into the screenplay with this movie, because, I will say right off the bat, the story here here is, like I said, very different. And the plot is definitely, not the smartest. There's a lot of stuff here that is kind of dumb. The idea that LeBron James is, offered this role to be like the head, the face of HBO Max, and he's gonna take over Warner Brothers and things like that, and then declines the offer. Yeah, that's kind of stupid. The idea that he's like whisked away into the land of Warner Brothers and he gets to see all these different lands. Yeah, that's kind of stupid. But you know what? I liked it. I thought that it was a lot of fun, and I think what works really well about the screenplay is that it really just embraces how weird and stupid it is. And I think that the original Space Jam, it's not that the original Space Jam did not do that. It's just I never felt that it did enough to fully win me over. This film, on the other hand, very much does. I mean, right off the bat, even though, yes, we have a dumb plot here, there's a lot more riding on this movie. It's not just the Looney Tunes are in this situation and they need LeBron James because he's LeBron James. Because that's essentially what the first movie is. They need Michael Jordan just because he's Michael Jordan. No other reason. There's really no other reason for it. They enlist the help of him because he's a well-known celebrity, one of the biggest celebrities of all time, and that's that. When it comes to LeBron James in this movie, there is an actual reason why he needs the help of the Looney Tunes, and I think that in general I was able to connect to his story a lot more because, like I said, he really is struggling as a father. You see throughout this movie, there are many moments where James is not exactly the most likable guy. There are moments where he is very selfish. I mean, the second that he's told to put together this team, he has all these options of like who he wants his team to be, and when he gets the Looney Tunes, he's very discouraged at first because he doesn't really he doesn't really see how they're going to be a good, team up against, whatever Algae Rhythm is planning. So again, there are many moments where he's not exactly the nicest guy, but he does go through a genuine arc in this movie. He goes through an arc of learning to be a better father, learning to accept the fact that maybe his son doesn't want to follow his father's footsteps. And I really liked that a lot. I thought that it was a really good storyline for him. I thought that LeBron as a character just went through a lot more, and he actually felt like a character in this movie. I feel like Space Jam, Michael Jordan just feels like Michael Jordan. Like there really isn't much to him. There isn't anything that he goes through, and here I felt like there was a legitimate arc there, and that was definitely a massive improvement for me. I just felt there was a lot more to latch onto when it came to LeBron James's depiction in this movie. But that also goes for the tunes here. I feel like the tunes here have a lot more to do. The first movie, they're kind of there, and they do have their individual moments, but I feel like here there's just a lot more going on, especially for Bugs. Bugs has a genuine bond with LeBron James, and it really works quite well. He's kind of in a predicament of his own. They haven't really gone into it much in the trailer, but there is a reason why the film for a while is just Bugs and LeBron James, and I think their interaction, one, was very strong. I really enjoyed the bond that these two ended up sharing, but I also enjoyed Bugs' individual story. It was something that I wasn't really expecting, and I thought that it worked very well, and I thought that the other Looney Tunes as well had some other good, individual stories. Like Daffy has this really fun story where he's the coach of the team, and he's really overdoing it, and I thought there was a lot of fun what they ended up doing with him. So yeah, I think that the dynamic with LeBron and the Tunes, it just feels a lot stronger. It feels like there's an actual arc there. Especially with the idea of, similar to his son, he wants the Tunes to be professional. He wants them to be very, diplomatic. He wants them to act like they're athletes, and obviously that's not who they are. They're the Looney Tunes, and I really enjoyed getting to see that. I thought that was an infinitely better arc for the characters, so that's something that I really did enjoy when it came to the screenplay. But let me address the elephant in the room, because a lot of people have brought up the fact that, this movie's just a commercial. There's not much going on here. There's not much going on with this movie. It's just a commercial. It's just a bunch of Warner Brothers properties. And yeah, I mean, a lot of this movie does focus on Warner Brothers as a company. The villain of the movie is literally an algorithm for Warner Brothers. But it's really not as much of the movie as you think it is. There is a montage that goes on for 10 minutes where LeBron is going through, where LeBron and Bugs are going through all these individual properties, all these different Warner Brothers IPs, and it's kind of fun to do. It's kind of fun to see them do that, but that only goes on for 10 minutes. And then during the basketball game itself, there's a lot of well-known, characters in the crowd. But that's about as far as it gets in terms of the IPs. So just the idea that, this movie is just capitalism at its finest, and it's Warner Brothers just, just showing off how great their content is, and that's all there really is to it. It's going to destroy cinema. I just can't really get behind that narrative, because that's a lot less of this movie than what people are really saying. So yeah, I think that they do a good job when it comes to the various Warner Brothers properties. It's very creative in that way, what they decide to do with it. But again, the thing that I kept coming back to in this movie that I think really does work is that father-son storyline. I think that it's a really strong story, and I think that Dom as a character is one that is really interesting too. You see that this is a kid that, he's constantly pressured to be like his dad, but he doesn't want to be that way, and you can see why Algae Rhythm kind of uses this to his advantage. He's kind of trying to turn the two against each other, and he's an infinitely better villain because of that. The Monstars or whatever in the first movie, there's nothing to them. You don't know anything about them. You don't know why they're such a threat. You don't really know what their plan is. Whereas Algae Rhythm, you can see what he wants to do. His motivation is clear. He wants to turn these two against each other and use that to his advantage, and I thought that worked really well. I enjoyed what they ended up doing there, and I thought that story was something that I did find myself really latching onto overall. And that being said, the basketball game itself, because of all of the buildup and because of the father-son storyline, the basketball game just has way more riding on it this time around. I mean, you feel the stakes in this movie, and also it's a lot longer here. The basketball game goes on for like 45 minutes, and it is so fun to watch. It's so creative and really dynamic. They really go all out in terms of the basketball game here. The rules are much more clearly stated. You feel like there's a lot more riding on this one. It just feels way more epic in that way. And so yeah, it does go on for a while, but I found myself so engrossed with what these characters were doing that I really just ended up liking I really just found myself just really loving every second of it. I thought that it was a lot of fun to watch, and I really enjoyed the basketball game a lot here. And in terms of humor, I think there was just a lot more humor in this movie that worked for me. I found myself laughing very frequently throughout this movie. There's a lot of great gags here that I enjoyed quite a bit. That being said, not every joke lands, and that is one of my issues with this movie, is that there is a bit of an over-reliance at points on trying to be a bit too modern. You saw it in the trailer. Things like, say, Lil P, Porky Pig, just never really worked for me in the way that I wanted it to. I thought things like that were just a little too ridiculous, a little too cringy, and nobody in my audience seemed to like it either. Like, they were not down for it at all, so I never really liked, say, things like Porky Pig rapping or some of the other jokes that go on in this movie. Just didn't really work for me. But it's when we get to see the tunes be the tunes, I think that's when this movie really does work. But also, Algae Rhythm, like I said, is just such a fun character. What he is willing to do, the lengths that he's willing to go. I mean, he really stops at nothing. And especially the basketball game itself, what he ends up doing there is a lot of fun to watch. And I just thought that, in general, it was just a way more creative story. So I really enjoyed the screenplay in this film. That being said, even though there are some jokes that really did not land in this movie, there are quite a few that I thought wouldn't work and actually did. The best of which is this cameo. And it's one of those things where on paper it sounds so dumb and you're like, no, there's no way this actually works. That seems like such a cheap joke. But the way in which they build it up, and the way they build it up and how it actually delivers is fucking amazing, and it's probably the funniest scene of the entire movie. I was absolutely dying when I actually saw what they ended up doing when it came to this specific cameo. It was just such a genius idea, and I thought it really did pay off. So there are quite a few things that shouldn't work, but yet they do, because I think the film is very clever in that way when it comes to its humor, and that's something that I really did end up appreciating about this film. Let's talk about the cinematography, because holy shit, that is easily one of the best elements of this entire film. The one thing you actually don't know going into this movie is that, yes, some of this film, the tunes are in live action, and they do look really good. I think this is probably some of the best CGI or 3D animation that I've seen when it comes to a classic IP like the Looney Tunes. I think that they did a really good job at translating that from, hand-drawn animation to 3D animation. I think it works very well in that way, and I really enjoyed what they ended up doing there. But actually, a significant portion of this film is actually in 2D animation, and it's really refreshing to watch because you're reminded just how the Looney Tunes are supposed to be. It feels like you're watching a classic Looney Tunes cartoon, and I really enjoyed a lot of what they end up doing there, and I think the way they blend that with some of the live action in this movie, it's just kind of seamless in that way, and I really enjoyed the cinematography a lot here. When it comes to the basketball game itself, like I said, I mean, it is just so fun to watch, but again, it's because of what they're doing on screen. I mean, there's so many points where this basketball game, there's a lot going on. There's a lot more going on in terms of style points, because you realize this is a video game. This is not really this is not a real basketball game. So the rules are clearly stated in that way. And so because of that, you see a lot of characters doing things for style points, and I enjoyed that a lot. I thought the cinematography was so good here. I especially enjoyed the animation, like I said, just really great. The score as well by Chris Bowers, I thought he did a really good job at composing this movie. You felt the epic feel here, but you also felt a lot more of the heart here, and I really enjoyed the score in this movie and the editing. I thought this film, for the most part, was very well paced. I never really felt the length all that much. I will say the first 20 to 30 minutes was a little bit slow for my liking, but I think once the mission actually starts, once LeBron is brought into Toon World, I think that's when the film really hits its stride. I think that's when the film gets really strong, especially those last 45 minutes are worth the price of admission alone, in my opinion. I really enjoyed what they ended up doing there. In terms of other flaws with this movie, I do think there are quite a few characters that just don't really have a lot to do here. Some of the other Looney Tunes, I just felt there wasn't a lot to them this time around. Lola Bunny especially. I'm glad that she's not a sex symbol anymore. I'm glad that that's not the case, but they really did not do much with her as a character. She has a really good bit when she's first introduced in this movie, but aside from that, they just didn't really do a ton with her, and I felt that they really could have taken more time to dive deeper into her character a little bit, give her a little bit more to do. I think that would have definitely made up. There were a couple other Looney Tunes that I felt kind of got the short end of the stick overall, but the larger issue is everything going on LeBron's side of things. When it comes to his family, and specifically Sonequa Martin Green, I felt that she was highly underused as a character. She starts off and you can see that she is someone that has a lot of fire in her, a lot of passion. She cares a lot about her son, but very quickly, she just kind of becomes the concerned mother/wife, and I wish that they did a lot more with her as an actress, because I felt that she had a lot more range in her than they really were giving her, and it just kind of bothered me overall. I want a little bit more when it came to her character, so I thought that kind of weighed the movie down a bit. And like I said, the first 20 to 30 minutes, I was not really feeling this movie. I thought that it was just kind of whatever, but I think once we get to, as I said, the actual plot at hand, and we start to realize more what this movie's actually about, I think that's when it really does work quite well for me. And there is something that happens in the third act of this movie, and it was actually really well done, and I was like, oh my god, they're actually going for this. I can't believe this is actually happening. And then they completely backtrack on it, and I just didn't understand why they even tried to do this. I don't understand why they went for this specific idea, because why would you do it if you're not actually going to stick to it? I just didn't really understand that overall. But other than that, Space Jam: A New Legacy is a highly creative and far more inventive film than I think people are giving it credit for. It has a really strong performance from LeBron James, as well as a lot of fun moments with the Looney Tunes. It also just has a lot more going on in terms of a story. There's a really good sort of father-son story to it that I really enjoyed quite a bit. The animation is truly stunning and some of the most colorful and dazzling I have seen in a live-action animated hybrid film in quite a bit, but also utilizes 2D animation a lot more than I think people are expecting it to. There's some really strong jokes in there. There's a lot of good, heartfelt moments. It really is just everything you could... I think it's much more of what I really do want in terms of a Looney Tunes live-action film. I think there's just a lot more this film does have riding on it. Yes, there are moments that are kind of cringy. Yes, there are some ideas that don't fully work out in the way they wanted to, but I think overall, considering how much that first film just never really worked for me, now I get it. I definitely do get why people like it. I get, I feel like they finally made it work here, and it's just disappointing to see that people are not really clicking with this one, because for me, I think this film was infinitely better than the original. So I am going to give Space Jam: A New Legacy overall a B-. But over, guys, to my review of Space Jam: A New Legacy. Let me know if you guys saw this movie at all, left your thoughts on it. We'll see you guys in my next video, and we'll see you guys for that. Okay, bye.